podcast of Second Chance Coaching. My name is Dr. Richard Lewis. If you'd be so kind as to leave me a rating and your feedback, I'd very much appreciate it, as it will help dynamic people such as yourself optimally discover this podcast and wherever they listen to podcasts, and they can add it to their library of favorite podcasts. As you know, at Second Chance Coaching, we focus on seeing everyday life through the eyes of the returning citizen and highlighting the resiliency of the human spirit. I'd love to work with you one-on-one, whether you're a returning citizen or coaching clients seeking their second chance, or you're a representative of a business college or university that's looking to integrate and support their respective returning citizens in your organizational and learning environments. Please feel free to contact me via email at richard@secondchancecoaching.com or via Instagram at @the_Dr.RichardLewis. I'd like to thank you, as always, for people who have continued to listen and support Second Chance Coaching. Thank you for returning, and thank you for spending a little time with us again this week. And for all new first-time listeners, we welcome you to the Second Chance Coaching family, and we hope that you continue to stick around with us and you enjoy the journey that we go on every single week. For those of you who know me, I will share with you that I'm a big comic book fan. I grew up collecting and reading comic books, and my childhood was dominated by immersing myself in the adventures of superheroes and supervillains. As an adult, I became a kid all over again. Between Marvel Studios, Disney Plus, and other comic book movies and shows, it has just completely been enjoyable to see all of these characters that I read as a kid come to life again. One of the comic book movies or series that I've enjoyed was the Batman Dark Knight trilogy. In the conclusion of the trilogy in 2012, the movie The Dark Knight Rises, one of the storylines that involved Selina Kyle, otherwise known as the Catwoman. She was in pursuit of a computer program called the Clean Slate. Now, the Catwoman wanted this program because there was an opportunity to use a tool that would completely erase her criminal record, her life, and give her the chance at a do-over for a new life. In other words, a clean slate. How many of us could look back on our lives and wish we went right instead of left? We've probably second-guessed our decisions and even looked at opportunities where we could have optimized our second and even third chances. Now, all of us have experiences, good and bad, that have made us who we are today. And undoing the bad could take away the good we've grown into and take away the lessons we've learned. But we still look and see where could we have gone left instead of right, up instead of down. You know, we all have done that. But let's take a look at this concept. You know, we took a comic book example of the clean slate, but let's look at this concept of clean slate. In the movies, it was like a flash drive which stores a computer program that gives you a life mulligan. A life mulligan. Wow, what a game changer. Now, as returning citizens on the reentry journey, we may not desire an erasure of life, but to have the ability to have one's criminal justice history erased. Now, that's the game changer for all of us. While the clean slate is set in a fictionalized environment, it is now very much real in the form of legislation that could give many returning citizens relief from the hundreds and thousands of collateral consequences resulting from a felony conviction. We live in a world today that once you're entangled in the criminal justice system in the United States, it is like living a silent life sentence. Now, I did not coin that phrase. That was from Michael Smith, who works for the Next 100, which is a policy think tank that you can find more information about them at thenext100.org, 100 being the number. And as a policy entrepreneur in his position, his area is criminal justice. Now, if we're talking about our country's criminal justice system as a mechanism to rehabilitate and heal, then clean slate legislation is an absolute no-brainer. The rehabilitation and healing is what must take place for survivors of crime as well as those who have been convicted. Now, we could have a whole other podcast episode about rehabilitation and healing, and we'll do that another time. But for today, we'll keep the focus on clean slate legislation. Now, let's get back to talking about collateral consequences. Returning citizens face numerous collateral consequences, which of course include employment, access to housing, higher education, voting, just to name a few. There are returning citizens I know that, because of a past prison sentence that's complete, have been denied things such as life insurance, denied credit cards, denied health insurance. And in my case, I had to disclose and explain my criminal justice history so I could complete the probate process with my sister of my mother's own estate. And I was able to get it done, but that's just once again goes into the many collateral consequences of a criminal justice history. Now, when this type of perpetual punishment takes place, it certainly tells me that rehabilitation and healing is not on the priority list in our criminal justice system. Okay, well, let's think about it like this. Let's say if you broke your arm by accident, or let's say you're a performer or an athlete or in any profession where there's physical risk, not deadly risk, but you hurt yourself like breaking your arm. Now, with treatment, time to heal, and maybe rehab, you become healthy again. Your body is not built to say your arm is permanently broken and it will never heal again. It will heal again eventually. Now, maybe that's a pretty rudimentary example, as there are people who have permanent injuries, but even in those cases, they are not defined by their injuries. They're defined by their strength and sustained resilience to overcome. But let's use another example. So, for example, you're in third grade and you get in trouble in school and you're given detention. You serve your detention and you return to class. You have the opportunity when you return to class to resume your educational journey as you have quote unquote served your detention time. So let's assume on your return to class, you're told because you served detention, you have to be in a separate room away from your class and receive your lessons via a video feed. Now, does that make sense? Now, let's say now you're no longer in the third grade. Now you're in the eighth grade and you're still in that separate class due to the consequences of what happened from a third grade detention. Now, does that make sense? I don't think it makes sense, but that's how our current criminal justice in the United States, with its collateral consequences, operates. 7 states are currently pushing campaigns or have clean slate legislation being considered in their state legislatures right now. These 7 states are Texas, New York, Oregon, Delaware, Louisiana, Connecticut, and North Carolina. The 3 states that already have clean slate legislation as effective law are Michigan, Utah, and Pennsylvania. Just in Pennsylvania alone, 36 million criminal records have been cleared to give that second chance to directly impacted individuals, and the momentum for clean slate legislation is fortunately growing. In Michigan, clean slate legislation was encompassed in state House bills 4980, 4981, 4982, 4983, 4984, 4985, and 5120, which all went into effect this past April 10th, 2021. Now, there are some exceptions to clean slate legislation in Michigan, such as impaired driving offenses, domestic violence, life offenses, or an attempt to commit a life offense, that clean slate legislation doesn't automatically kick in. But the Michigan clean slate legislation calls for on October 12th, 2022 to start, that if most misdemeanors have had 7 years pass since the imposition of the sentence, then it would be automatically done and eligible for clean slate legislation. At the same time, too, in Michigan, for felonies, it would be 10 years since the imposition of the sentence. And of course, in misdemeanors and felonies in Michigan, there are exceptions to automatic clean slate eligibility in both instances. Now, in October 2022, upcoming, Michigan expects to have this clean slate expunction process to be automatic without an application process. Right now, it's an application process. They expect it with some of those exceptions in October 2022 to have this process be automatic. Now, in New York, there's a strong effort towards passing clean slate legislation. The 2 bills regarding clean slate in New York are Senate Bill 1553A and Assembly Bill 6399, which would automatically clear one's New York's criminal record once they become eligible. Now, in New York, in the case of a misdemeanor, it would be 1 year past the imposition of the sentence. And for a felony in New York, it would be 3 years past the imposition of the sentence. The proposed legislation would call for an automated two-step process. First, there would be an automatic sealing of one's record. And then second, an automatic expungement once one has served their sentence. And that, of course, is based on the eligibility of the individual situation based on the crime in which they were convicted of. Now, the proposed New York legislation is certainly progressive, and more information can be found at cleanslateny.org. Now, the good news is at the time of this episode, at the time in which I was prepping for this episode, the New York bills were in legislative committee. However, the great news is that at the time of the recording of this episode, Senate Bill 1553A has passed the New York Senate Codes Committee. So we remain hopeful that this game-changing legislation will be passed and will eventually be a model for the entire United States of America. Now, it's not only hype. This is not hype that this is game-changing legislation. This can prevent the exclusion of returning citizens from the workforce. It can prevent the exclusion of access to housing. It could prevent exclusion from the access to higher education. It could prevent the exclusion of the access to vote, the access to life insurance, health insurance, access to credit cards, and just plain and simple access to their second chance. The second chance that does not punish people beyond their sentences and allows for full and fair participation economically, socially, and at the end of the day, this strengthens our communities by making them more sustainable, more safer, and certainly more vibrant. This makes what is a vision or a dream or part of a plot in a comic book movie. This becomes all of those things now a reality, really, like I said, a game-changing opportunity for countless returning citizens. Now, here's to 2021 and clean slate legislation becoming a reality in New York, and state by state, the beginning steps to eradicate felony disenfranchisement in the United States. This happens one step at a time, and I'm certainly confident we could do it together. Because certainly, like I said, this game-changing legislation could really make the difference in a returning citizen's life. To say, you know what, I want to take the next step to have better sustainable employment, better housing, access to education, all of those things that if an individual rises and an individual does well, then everyone's doing well. And the communities become, like I said, more sustainable, safer, and certainly more vibrant. We'll definitely be keeping an eye on clean slate legislation in New York as it continues to go through its progression through the legislature. And certainly we're going to be monitoring clean slate legislation across the United States. In the meantime, certainly if you need to work with me and you want to work with me, give me an email, shout me out, send me an email at richard@secondchancecoaching.com, or reach out to me via Instagram at the Dr. Richard Lewis. I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to work with you, and I'd love to take you through your journey of your reentry journey, a successful reentry journey, a game-changing reentry journey. Remember, you've been blessed to see that another day. You've been blessed another day, another moment, another minute, another hour. That means you've been blessed with that second chance.